All right. Hello, and hi, and welcome to the HTML5 lecture series at SNHU. I'm Tom Adamson, visiting professor, and this is lecture 7. Now, lecture 7, we're going to be talking about the document model. Now, the document model. Why is this important? It's because we're going to be talking about how the web document, the thing that comes from the server, that interacts with the browser and gives instructions to the browser so that the browser can present to me a web page that the viewer sees, how we can work with that as objects. So we need to understand how the document itself is constructed with the elements. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to start a typical structure of a web document. And the web document, keep in mind, is nothing more than a text file. It does have the extension .html or .htm, but what it really is just a text file. So one of the first things that we'll see on the document is we'll see an exclamation mark. We'll see a less than sign with an exclamation mark, and in caps it'll say doc, D-O-C, T-Y-P-E, doc type, and it'll say H-T-M-L in lowercase, and this is my document. This is what's coming to my browser to give it instructions. Now, when it sees this, that tells the browser that this is going to be structured as an HTML5 document. That's what this means. There's other doc types too for older versions of HTML. Like there's a doc type for XHTML, transitional, doc type for XHTML strict, and so on. So when we do it this way, this means it's going to be for HTML5. The very first thing that we have is we have an element called HTML. And so here's my HTML element. The element, as a reminder, has a start tag and an end tag, and then it has whatever is between it. Right now, this is acting as an empty element. Within the HTML element, I have what's called a head, H-E-A-D, I have a head element. So I'm indenting this to show that this element, this head element, is within the HTML element. The HTML element also has a body element. So what I see here is that the HTML element contains two other elements. It contains a head element, which right now is empty. It contains a body element, which right now is empty. And here's how I think about this. This is my HTML element. And let's think of it as a person. And this HTML element, as a person, has two children. They're children because the head element and the body element are contained within the HTML element. It has two child elements. They're called child elements. Here's one child element. They're holding on the hands here. And this one is, I'm going to call it the head element. So that's the name of this child. And here's the other child, which is called the body element. And they're holding hands here. And this is the body. So this right here is a parent element. This is a child element. This is a child element. And since both these child elements have the same parent, they are referred to as siblings. We're beginning to see the relationship between how the elements are structured within a web document. we can see that a parent element can have one or more siblings, one or more children, but a child element can only have one parent. So a parent element can have one or more child elements but a child element can have only one parent. So there's one fact right here. Here's the second fact right here. And there's a third fact. Elements with the same parent are called siblings. Okay, there's the third fact. So we can see that we have a parent element, and the parent element, which is HTML, right now has two child elements. One's called the head, the other's called the body. All right? So far, so good. However, what we can do is we can further look inside the head element. I need to expand this. And what's put inside the head element is a title element. I'm indenting again. The title element will have some content, and that's the content that generally search engines will look for. And it should be descriptive. Everything you need to know is right here. Everything is here. How's that? That should really get the search engines going. And then I'm going to close the title element like that. So I see I have inside the head element, here's my body again. I'll put my body down here. Here's my body element. And here's my ending HTML element, my ending tag. So what I see here is the head element is a parent of a title element. And the title element is a child of the head element. So what that means is that this is the head. The head element is actually sort of growing up. And the head element also becomes a parent. And the head element, this is the head element now. The head element is a child of the HTML element. However, the head element is also a parent now of the title element. And we begin to see this family tree. Make him sort of happy here. Okay, like that. Okay, that's the title element. Title element is a child of the head element. Also, what goes inside the head element is some more elements. I'm going to need to erase this down here. What goes inside here is also a style element. Right now it's an empty element. Also, what goes inside the head element is a script element. These are optional elements, but they can be inside here. And then also what can go in here are meta elements. And then that will finish, for now, that will finish the head element. And then we'll have the body element. And then we'll end the body tag. And then we'll end HTML. So what I see here now is that the head element has a title element as a child, it also has the style element. As another child, it also has the script element. As a child, it also has the meta element. As a child. So this head element's been pretty prolific. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 child elements. And actually, the head element can have even more child elements. And all these elements here, since all of them have the same parent, these elements are called siblings. So what I could say in the literature, what the HTML5 literature is going to tell me, it's going to assume that I know what this relationship means. It's going to say that, as you know, the title and the style element are siblings. There should be a Y here. And I need to know what that means, and that they're contained inside the head element. Now, some of these elements, like the title element, always go in the head element. Some of these other elements, like the script element, that can also go in the body element. And then it becomes a child of the body. It can also be, at the same time, a child of the head element. And what goes inside these elements here? Well, this will set up for the styling of our web page. This right here is where we'll have our scripting language, our programming language, JavaScript. This right here will give us more information about the web page. So the basic structure that I see of a document, the basic model of it, is like this. And I'm going to put a basic model right up here so we can see what one looks like in the flesh. But what we need to know is we need to know the relationship of parents, of children, and of siblings, because we're going to be using this in order to understand the future documentation of HTML5 and how to manipulate it. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is this is going to be my document. It's nothing more than a text editor, and it's using as a document, and it's going to be fed into an HTML document here. So first thing we're going to have is this, the doc type, and that's all cap. Okay, and then lowercase, I'm going to have HTML, like that. All right, what I'm going to do now is HTML. Now, I'm going to bring it down here. Notice that in all of this right here, the HTML element does not have any parents. It doesn't have any parent. Therefore, the HTML element is sort of like a king. And the HTML element has a very important term. It is called the root element. And as we'll see, every web document must have a root element. We'll also see that other kinds of documents like XML and XHTML, they also need a root element. A root element is the element that has no parent, and it encloses, it is the parent and grandparent and so on of all the other elements inside the document. So this HTML is the root element. So what comes after the HTML? Well, I'm going to indent just to let you know who the children are. The first one is the head. Okay, so we have a head element here. Close that off. Okay. The next one is the body. Okay. I'm going to close this one off. There we are so far. So we have the two child elements here, head and body. They're children of the HTML element. And they are both, these two are siblings. So I got to close, I closed off the body. So now let's put what goes inside the head element. There's a child inside the head element that's called title. I'm just going to call it my page. That'll be the content. And then I'm going to spread this out a little bit so the line break doesn't bother us. So there's a child right here of the head element. Okay. let's see, there's another child here, and we said, what was that? Style? This is where my style sheets are going to go. We'll talk about those. The other thing I said that we could have here as a child is script. Script will go in here, and the other thing I said we could have in here is meta. Whoops. So meta tags go inside there. The body element right now is an empty element. As a matter of fact, all the elements that we have here, with the exception of the fact that they have child elements, all the elements we have are empty elements. In the body element, this right here, this is where we're going to have stuff that's going to be presented on the web page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. I'm going to come here to File, and I'm going to save. And then I'm going to come over here and let's initiate the browser and see what kind of output I get on the web page from the structure. I'm going to left click, and what do I get? Absolutely nothing. You say, wait a minute, you went through all this? Let's right click and look at the page source. There's the page source. Isn't that what I put in? Was this stuff right here? Right? That's what I put in, correct? And you might say, wait a minute, you put in all of that structure, and it didn't do anything. Well, yes, it did. What I've used here, the elements that I've used here are structural elements. The structure of this web document right here, it will be the same for all web documents that are going to be HTML5 compliant. What they do is they set a structure for the browser. The browser expects certain things to be at certain places at certain times. And within that structure now, I can start putting things in that'll do some really, really cool stuff. So what we learned in this lecture today, this is a relatively short lecture, we learned the important terminology of parent, child, siblings, and we learned about how the document that's going to be used for HTML5, how its basic structure should appear. What we're going to do in the next lecture is we're going to talk about some other goodies that we can use with these elements that change what they do. They're called attributes. Okay, that's it for this lecture. Thank you for attending.